The EU signed a long-term security commitment with Ukraine as President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the 27 leaders in Brussels.
The Israeli military has released photos it claims prove a killed aid worker was a Hamas militant.
Serbia and Kosovo talks are inconclusive once again, despite EU efforts.
The European Union doubled down its support to Ukraine by signing a long-term security commitment with the country, as President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the 27 leaders in Brussels on Thursday.
Security agreements with Ukraine is very important so that we can give the message that we intend to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We want to be operational, we want to be concrete.
The agreement is not a mutual defense pact, but formalizes the EU's commitment on supporting Ukraine. The pact comes as the EU is delivering the first package of military equipment to Ukraine, financed by Russian frozen assets. President Zelensky celebrated it, but would like things to move faster.
It's very important for all of us, for all Ukraine, believe me. And of course we have to work on next steps. You always say that we are too quick, but we need the urgent things. Air defense, that is one. And of course all that packages, thanks to all the partners. What we had signed it or accepted, but we need them urgently on the battlefield.
President Zelensky said he had no dialogue with Russia so far, but is looking forward to a second peace summit after the one held in Switzerland in mid-June.
We have to find and to prepare this plan and to put this plan on the table during months. We don't have too much time because we have a lot of wounded and dead people on the battlefield and through civilians. That's why we don't want to have this war during years. So that's why we want to prepare this joint plan, put it on the table to the second peace summit.
After leaving the European Council summit, President Zelensky met with Jens Stoltenberg, the outgoing Secretary General of NATO, and also signed bilateral agreements on security with Estonia and Lithuania.
South Korea has warned Russia not to endanger their relationship as the Kremlin ramps up its partnership with Pyongyang. The comments come as a Russian foreign ministry official this month criticized Seoul over potentially supplying Ukraine war supplies.
한러 관계에 돌이킬 수 없는 결과를 초래하지 않도록 러시아 측이 실수하지 말 것을 경고합니다. 또한 러시아 측이 북한에 대한 의존에서 벗어나 안보리 상임 이사국답게 처신하기를 바랍니다.
Earlier this month, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un firmed up their allyship by agreeing to protect each other from foreign aggression. North Korea is also reportedly mulling an agreement to send military personnel to repair Russian infrastructure. Meanwhile, Russian media reports 10,000 newly minted Russian citizens were sent to the front lines.
Formal talks on Moldova's accession to the European Union are underway.
Only now we start to having a really democratic and free society, and we want to maintain that. And the European Union will make sure of that.
The discussions are being hailed as historic. Shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine in early 2022, the country applied for EU membership. Neighboring Moldova, the poorest country in Europe, followed shortly after. The war sparked many Ukrainians to flee to Moldova, like Ola from near Odessa. She says being part of the EU is what's best for her daughter.
Я, конечно, хочу, чтобы моя дочь стала частью Евросоюза, чтобы она жила в Евросоюзе, чтобы она жила в развитой стране, в цивилизованной, чтобы у нее был шанс на учебу, что у нее был шанс на свободу слова. Я это очень хочу. А как бы вступление в Евросоюз, это полностью коррупции нет. Поэтому это будет не происходить не быстро, это нужно будет сделать шагами, потихонечку, постепенно.
But Moldova remains much under Russian influence.
Также мы должны уделять особое внимание и конструктивному диалогу с Востоком, да, с Российской Федерацией, с Беларусью, с нашими традиционными партнерами.
There's been no progress in talks in Brussels to forge an EU-backed agreement between Belgrade and Pristina. Speaking after meetings with Serbian President Alexander Vučić and Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti, Joseph Borrell, the EU foreign policy chief, said that the European Union will continue to put all efforts and capacity to normalisation of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. The leaders of the two countries were in Brussels for talks to implement a European Union-backed plan to normalise ties.
The discussions were, as expected, as difficult as always have been, and in the end, they were not a trilateral meeting. Kosovo was not ready for this. Kosovo was not willing to do this trilateral meeting. Serbia was ready to do it. But you need two to dance tango. And we need two to sit around the table in order to continue the dialogue. This has not been possible today. Unfortunately, no progress in implementation of the agreement could be achieved today.
Brussels has warned both Serbia and Kosovo that refusal to compromise jeopardises their chances of joining the bloc.
As the UK prepares to hold a general election, the leading Conservative Party looks ready to lose to the opposition Labour Party for the first time in 14 years.
A Labour victory would definitely be a step up for UK-EU relations. The EU will know that the Labour Party was fighting for the UK's continued membership of the EU. They know that. And they also know that the Labour Party doesn't have the same bizarre hostilities to the EU that the previous few governments have had.
Despite calling for a re-referendum in 2019, Starmer has publicly hardened his approach and ruled out any return to the single market or customs union.
I think the reason, is that they don't want to name things which could be lightning rods for criticism from the Conservatives or from certain elements of the more Brexit-supporting press in the UK. So I think they probably do have more ideas up their sleeve, but I'm not sure the party necessarily has decided exactly which ones it itself wants to go for in power. I think it will depend to some degree on the size of any majority it has. If the majority is smaller than expected, only 20 or 30 seats maybe, they'll be less willing to take political risks.
When it comes to NATO, the Labour Party are as committed to the pact as their Tory predecessors. They have promoted a security pact between the UK and the EU, although the details on this remain vague. Experts have said that a Labour victory will largely mean that the new party will attempt to come to negotiations with a clean slate and make themselves more present in negotiations with the EU.
I think Labour are really going to focus on demonstrating their presence in Europe, and they are a different type of operation to the Conservatives. If you look at their rhetoric, there's a lot focused on meetings and presence and public engagement. That's really what this security pact is actually all about.
If the Labour government make it into power, they could be set to negotiate a tricky renewed role for the UK in the European Union, having to appeal to both Brussels' requirements and large portions of its electorate who voted for Britain to leave the EU to start with.
The Israeli military has released photos of what it says show a staffer with the aid group Doctors Without Borders wearing military fatigues at a gathering of Gaza militants. Fadi al-Wadia was killed in an airstrike on Gaza City earlier this week while he was cycling to work at the charity's nearby clinic. Israel claims the photos prove al-Wadia was a significant operative in the Islamic Jihad group and was involved in its rocket program. The aid group has said it had no indication he was a militant. It comes as 3 airstrikes killed at least 18 people and injured several others in the crowded Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza earlier this week. The local hospital director said there were women and children among the killed.
كنا في البيت قاعدين سمعنا انفجار صار قريب منا طلعنا لقينا أشلاء وشهداء مرميين استهداف لمجموعة مدنيين ما لهمش دخل في كل العسكرية أشلاء مرمية هان ومثل ما أنتم شايفين في شهداء في جرحى.
Elsewhere in Gaza, the stifling summer heat has raised health risks in refugee camps as the territory's ability to dispose of garbage, treat sewage and deliver clean water has been virtually decimated by war.
Two military officials allegedly responsible for leading an attempted coup against the Bolivian government have been arrested. The 3-hour uprising featuring tanks and troops storming the presidential palace was quickly foiled as its leaders did not receive opposition support to successfully topple government.
El señor Zúñiga, el señor Arnés y las otras personas que han planificado y han conspirado para intentar cometer un golpe de Estado en nuestro país han perdido toda la credibilidad. Son personas que nadie les cree que lo que estaban haciendo, por lo menos el señor Zúñiga, los medios de comunicación, era tratar de conseguir un apoyo popular.
Once the unrest simmered, left-wing Bolivian President Luis Arce stood from the presidential balcony in the capital and thanked those who protested against the coup. No one can take away the democracy that we have won at the polls and in the streets with the blood of the people, he said.